We stand on the threshold of a great new age of exploration. Its ultimate destination, the furthest reaches of the universe.
3, 2, 1.
Its ultimate destination, the furthest reaches of the universe.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good? Good. My name is Kenya Thompson. I want to welcome you here to RTP180 and to Frontier RTP. I am the host of Black Issues Forum on PBS North Carolina. I also want to say a welcome to our PBS viewers who are streaming live. I've had the chance to host this before. Some of you may recognize my face. Some of you, this might be the first time you're meeting me. Hello. This is a great way for you to learn big ideas into kind of a more digestible, smaller footprint. And so our speakers tonight will be doing just that. Before we dive in, I do want to thank our presenting sponsor, RTI International. Make sure that you grab one of their rechargeable fans over here on the table. If you haven't already done so. So for those of you that have never been here before for one of these events, our format is that each speaker will have 7 minutes to talk about their topic tonight. And then we will follow up. I'll come back up here and we'll do a Q&A. So prepare your questions as the speakers are speaking so that we can grab your questions and you can have your questions answered. Okay. Make sure that you are also following along at the RTP and check out our past talks on YouTube. And tonight. So tonight, what are we exploring? Music. Music. I think this is going to be a good one. It's not about just what we hear, right? But it's about how it's made, how it's evolving and growing, and how, more importantly, it shapes our community and our culture. When you came in, you might have seen some of that in action. We had an a cappella group out there, Second Shift, that's been performing together since 2007. And you likely saw the Audio Engineering Society student chapter from NC State showcasing their work out there as well. So it's really about this full ecosystem of music, from creativity to technology to history and economics. So I want to transition into introducing our first speaker of tonight. Our first speaker brings a perspective that connects innovation, technology, and music in a really unique way. I learned something very special about this man. His last name means the man of the situation, okay? Dr. Edgard Ngaboyamahina, excuse me, is an innovation advisor at the RTI International with more than 15 years of experience advancing environmental technologies. And earlier in his career, he actually founded a music label focused on urban African music. Join me in welcoming Dr. Ngaboyamahina.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Perfect. Yes. My name is Edgard Ngaboyamahina, and one thing that I want to start with is that a while ago I was told that if you look into the future, you can look into the past at the same time. So I'm an innovation advisor at RTI, and what I do on a daily basis is basically to provide innovation services to our clients, which means how to bring a breakthrough idea into market reality. And when you think about music creation and music distribution, it follows the same process. We have some feelings, we have some sentiments, we have some ideas, and we want to share those with the rest of the world. And that's exactly what innovation is about, to bring a breakthrough idea into market reality. Now, with any type of innovation, one thing that we need to understand is that it follows different phases when it comes to adoption. The first phase is for the adoption of innovators. These are the folks who really understand that this has potential. Even if the innovation is not well packaged, they will still try to adopt that innovation because they are excited about it. Think about those who are in line when there is a new iPhone, they will stay 10 hours waiting for the shop to open. Now we have the early adopters. They are the ones who basically realize, okay, there is something cool about this innovation. I'm going to be curious and then learn how to adopt it. And then you have the majority, you have the early majority, and then the late majority. And at the end, we have, the late comers. These are the ones who basically will say, it's been 10, 15 years, I've seen this around, everyone is using it, so why not try? So we have the laggers, the late comers. Now, to give you a little bit of background about how I came up, with this talk and, where I come from, I've been doing music for the past 30 years. And then when I started, I didn't have access to any sound engineer. I didn't have access to a recording studio. I didn't have access to a recording label. I was not, a high-performing artist. So basically, I was left with myself, with my friends, and I remember when we were in high school, we just wanted, to do music. And the only equipment we had were 2 boom boxes, 2 radios, and then the way we were recording, we were playing music, so instrumental on one, and then we were recording with the other one. At the same time, we were singing, so you can imagine how hard it was, to just, have quality sound. But, we were just, satisfied with what we were doing because, we could brag about it, the day after when we were going back to school. So that was fun. Now, I would not consider myself as an innovator in terms of music creation and distribution because, again, I didn't have access to, this ecosystem of recording studio, label. I was not, a high-performing artist. So now, 10 years later, when I went to college, or a little bit earlier than that, I had access to, a computer. And this is when you had all these digital audio work stations that would allow you to emulate different instruments. At that time, I was only playing guitar, but I could, emulate a drum. I could, use the same software to have, a saxophone line. I could use the same software to basically add different lines into my music creation. So I was able to enrich my music by just a software. And this allowed me basically to make connections with different artists, and this is when I started my own recording label. So we had our home studio, we were able to distribute music thanks to the advancement of technology. And that's how actually we consider ourselves as early adopters of music creation and distribution. Now, these past few years, we have seen AI that has accelerated the diffusion of the adoption of music creation and distribution. And I'm particularly excited because it has democratized the way we are creating music. Now, everyone is capable of doing it. We don't need to learn how to write music. We don't need to learn how to play an instrument. Some folks have never touched an instrument, but they can still create music. So now when you think about the adoption framework that I described at the beginning, we are in this stage where the majority, either the early or the late, will be able to basically create music, distribute their own music. And what I'm anticipating in the future is that everyone on a daily basis will be able to do music, to create music and distribute music, because that's just the way innovation gets diffused through different layers of the population. Now, once we have all the folks, everyone, doing the same thing, it is important to find ways to differentiate ourselves. So the value now becomes not just about producing music, but how we engage with our audience, how we perform on stage. And when you think about how music was being distributed or created, I would say 100 years ago, the artists who were the best, who were the most famous, were the ones who could actually perform on stage. So what I'm anticipating is that in the future, once everyone has access to music, has access to creation, has access to distribution, we will still need to differentiate ourselves by the way we engage with our audience, the way we engage with people around us, the way we perform on stage. So that's why now I better understand that when you actually look into the future, you understand actually the past. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. I want to go ahead and ask you to get your questions prepared. If you raise your hand, a mic will come to you. I'm going to start with the first question, though. Where are we on the adoption curve for AI in music right now?
I think it's accelerating. It's accelerating, which is great. Now, I can understand that some individuals might be skeptical about how AI is replacing creativity. I can understand that folks are concerned about copyright. But then again, when you think about AI is a general purpose technology. Everyone ultimately will have access to AI, again, to some extent. Meaning that when we start seeing artists who openly admit that they are using AI to be influenced, when we start seeing platforms who basically allow AI-enabled music production, then I think we are in a phase where AI will become just, part of our life. And I think we are slowly going into this transition when AI will just, disappear. And just like when you think about music produced with these digital audio workstations, 30 years ago, it was not necessarily acceptable, or auto-tune was not necessarily acceptable. Now it's just, part of the music landscape, and I think, AI will just become the same.
I think we have a question in the audience.
Hey, thank you for your talk here. I like your idea about auto-tune being unaccepted and now it's pretty accepted. When I think through the business of creating a piece of music and then making that available to others, there's a lot of administrivia that goes on, the publishing part, uploading, packaging, putting words around it. Like, what do you think the biggest need is to enable the human creativity where AI can help?
Well, I would say the human creativity, first of all, will remain the same. Because if you think about what I said earlier about how music creation is an innovation itself, it's all about our sentiments, what we feel, what we have experienced. Now, all the other layers, everything that comes around is necessary to some extent, but AI can allow actually artists to even actually make more money. It can allow artists to express themselves in a faster way. It can allow to lower barriers to entry to the music industry. And I think this is where we have an opportunity with AI.
Others to produce?
Excuse me?
So you're saying this will unlock others to be able to produce and distribute by being smaller and not needing the resources of sound engineers as much or other types of professionals that might be expensive and out of their reach?
Yes, absolutely. It's about democratization of music. It's making sure that everyone who has an idea, everyone who wants to do music is capable of sharing their own music to the world. And it's not just a small part of the human population.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, there's a hand being raised back there, Sam.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question regarding ownership.
Yes.
As you discuss the notion of AI creating content, you're suggesting that the performer is still the human. And I don't see that way, and I wonder if there's going to be, do you actually own the music that the AI creates? So will the money ever come back to the is it copyrightable? And I think the answer is no right now. So I think that's a challenge we face in that we have separated or segregated the notion of the human creator and the actual creation of the music by AI. Your comments?
Yes, I understand actually, and that's a valid point. Now, we still need a regulatory framework to make sure that everything is well understood and is harmonized across the globe. But I will give you an example. In the music industry, you have ghostwriters. You have artists who are going to record a song and then give that song to another artist to actually perform that song. And the way copyright is being shared across those artists is well understood. And I think, with AI, it's going just to be the same. We just need to accept the fact that it's going to be accelerated and streamlined, but the principles remain the same. And at the end of the day, I believe that the performer, which will be the value differentiator, will definitely need, to own most of the value.
Wonderful. Another question. While we wait for someone to raise their hands, I have a question. So you alluded to earlier, everyone will be able to create music. Do you see that taking opportunities from the engineers and the other professionals that have been in this industry for such a long time, people can't afford them, right? So do you see AI being kind of a thorn in their side in the future?
Well, 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, when we started having, ChatGPT, Gemini being available to everyone, someone told me, in the future you will have two types of professionals. You will have those who use AI and those who are unemployed. So, which means that we need to adapt. Just when you had, the Industrial Revolution, it has displaced certain professions, certain jobs, and I think this is something that is going to happen. But again, we should not see AI in music as a threat, but more as a tool to create new ideas, to think differently.
There's a question over there by Sam.
Hi, yeah. So you mentioned the regulatory process, but we all know the regulatory process is notoriously slow. We see that in every facet of government. We're even seeing it now in terms of like social media and just kind of fully understanding the effects of it and like the algorithms just catching up to it now, but the technology moves a lot faster, and we're gonna see the same thing with AI. So if the regulatory process doesn't move at the same speed, we need to address some of these questions, for example, around ownership and copyright. What is the responsibility of the companies like Anthropic or OpenAI, and and outside of them, what roles should non-government, and who plays what roles, and how do we address this in a way that moves at the speed the technology is moving when government doesn't usually move that fast?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question and a broader topic, that we can discuss, and it will probably take, longer than, we want tonight, because it doesn't only touch on music. One thing that I want to say is that when it comes to music, when it comes to creation, and as an artist, we should not think about regulations because it's just a barrier. We should just, express ourselves the way we can with the tools that we can, and then at some point, the regulatory framework, we'll just need to adapt to art.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna get it right this time. Dr. Ngaboyamahina, the man of the situation. Thank you. All right, so let's continue this. We're going to continue the talk between music and technology, introduce our next speaker. Dr. Justin Matthew is an associate teaching professor at NC State and leads the music technology program. He works exploring spatial audio, new instruments, and how we experience sound in entirely new ways. Welcome, Dr. Justin Matthews.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Wonderful. All right, so my talk is titled Spatial Dimensions of Sound and Music, and a lot of my research is around the concept of space. So when we talk about the spatiality of sound, we can think about it in these three different ways. One is spatial acoustics and perception, which is really how sound travels in space, but also how we hear it, how it arrives at one ear versus another ear, allowing us to understand how the sound originates from, or where it originates from, as well as spatial interaction. So how we actually look at instruments, the different types of keys, how they're laid out, how the notes are laid out, and how we actually move our body in that space in order to create a sense of expression. And lastly, information layers. Information layers and the concept of we can extract a lot of things out of sound. In particular, we commonly extract speech and language. But a lot of different aspects of sound and music can have other aspects of it, and we like to analyze those things for various different purposes. Okay, so spatial hearing and acoustic propagation. This is a lot of where my focus is, in particular binaural localization, which is the idea of where sounds are coming from different directions. They arrive at one ear differently at the other ear. And those differences allow us to perceive certain directions where their sound comes from. But they're not that precise compared to vision, especially in spaces where there's a lot of reverberation and echo or a lot of different noises. So we think about different things of like wave diffraction and sound waves, how they bend around different places, and how they affect our hearing and understanding of space. And a lot of aspects of how we are able to extract streams of information with that knowledge of being able to differentiate between sounds coming between both of our ears. And one of my main research here is in the concept of localization potential. So it's the idea that we're in a big, crowded space where there's a lot of different types of sounds, but we're still able to extract information out of that. So if you think about the famous cocktail party problem, where you're in a cocktail party and someone yells your name out, and you're able to essentially latch onto your name and be able to turn to a direction where that sound's coming from. A lot of that is based off of the idea that we can extract information when sounds are overlapping each other. And what this video was showing was two different types of speeches moving over each other and how much they actually blur in the differences between our left and right ear. And in reality, it blurs a lot, but we can actually still extract those voices that way because of it. And it's actually a really, really fascinating aspect of it. Of our listening capabilities that we don't necessarily have with our vision as much. And then we go into spatial interaction. Spatial interaction, when we think about spatial audio, we think about typically like movie theaters and Dolby Atmos and video games where sounds get placed in different locations. Well, a lot of the work I was initially doing was looking at the concept of how sounds are, how you can actually place those things in sounds when you're designing these types of experiences. So whether it's video games, whether it's movies, whether it's AR or VR systems, how you actually place sounds in different locations. It's really difficult to do that if you're using just a computer, a mouse, and a keyboard. You're essentially trying to interact with two dimensions and trying to essentially create this landscape of 3 dimensions. That's not easy to do. So a lot of my research has been focusing on how we design controlling interfaces to be able to navigate spatially, which has led me to really looking at this in the point of view of musical instruments and how we place different and how we design musical instruments to interact with spaces, allowing us to trigger different types of musical notes, which allows us to express ourselves in different musical ways. Which is, a lot of this is focused on what we call our proprioception, which is our awareness of where our body is within space. And that is a skill set that people have to learn, especially with musical instruments. Which really, here's a research project that we've been working on where we're tracking users' fingers and also identifying which keys are being played. And a lot of this work is to start measuring how different types of pieces how they get played and how we are able to navigate those. This is where I think the future of music is actually going. It really is designing new musical instruments for people to express themselves. This is a musical instrument where a person has pedals on the ground who controls these plates that are spinning, and with these gloves that they have, they're able to navigate across the space and be able to control a synthesizer. Versus using a traditional keyboard, they're looking at different types of modalities and affordances that you can create with a musical instrument like this, where you can control the speed of the motion, which can map to some sort of frequency, as well as where you place your hand along that space. This creates spatial gestural controls for people and allows them to express themselves in various and very, very unique ways. And then in my last aspect of my research is really around extracting sonic information. We think about this from the point of view a lot of times from speech, being speech recognitions. All of our smart home systems are able to now try to listen to us and extract what we're doing. But also this notion of being able to extract higher level concepts of mapping different types of meaning, whether someone's being sarcastic versus being nice, or symbolic mapping like musical notations and different themes. Which brings me to my big question that I will end my presentation and my talk on, which is really, what is the AI instrument here? When we think about musical instruments and we're designing AI instruments, they're very deterministic. We expect people to learn to be able to play an instrument by pressing a note and being able to know what that sound is going to be. With AI systems, it goes off a large data set of different types of songs that have a distribution of different types of symbolic information and semantic information out of that. That creates a probabilistic system, which is not the same as being deterministic. So what actually is a generative AI as a sonic instrument is a question that I think is we've been pondering quite a bit. And I will end there.
Thank you, Justin. Really incredible. Same thing, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Sam will come to you. In the meanwhile, I've got a question. What are some novel developments you would say exist in this field right now?
Yeah, so when it comes to spatial hearing, a lot of different types of systems, like spatial audio systems like microphones and headphones, they're actually adding EEG sensors on these headphones, where they're trying to measure your brain waves while you're listening. And this is supposed to understand how the brain reacts to different types of sound stimulus, which has been a very challenging space to be able to extract a lot of information, but there's some really promising things around where people are able to, they'll be able to detect what types of music, what types of sound helps people focus. When it comes to musical instruments, and obviously generative AI side of things, there's just a lot of new musical instruments out there actually, coming from small shops. But they're developing different types of systems like that, that new type of rotary piano that they're trying to create, different types of string-based instruments. So there's a lot of unique different ways people are exploring ways to express themselves musically.
Thank you. We have a question?
First of all, thank you for approaching this topic. I think it's very difficult to sort of give an answer right now since it's so early. We all celebrate the human creativity, and I think of this on a spectrum of maybe the human is responsible for everything. And I use Ableton. In Ableton, there's a thing called an arpeggiator, and I can tweak the settings of the arpeggiator, and it will make random arpeggiated sounds. But it's up to me to select which ones I want to keep, and then how to use those rhythmically or in some sort of melody. So I'm curious, given that you have a much broader view of this, where is the human best involved? And where do we think about creativity?
Well, I think when it comes to creativity, I think that is a very broad aspect of someone being able to explore. And that whole concept of exploration formulates itself in various different ways and experiences and it's very unique to an individual. I think that if you're going to look at ways I'm assuming around AI side of things and its effect on creativity, I'm not necessarily sure that it is something that can stop people from being creative. I do think that it's probabilistic and it's going to allow people to be harder to be deterministic in expressing themselves musically. But I do think that it doesn't necessarily have to be something that gets thrown away to the side. I think it could be something of interest for people to explore. It's not much different than someone going into a record store, picking a random record, and then listening to it, and trying to get inspiration out of that. I do think that there's some avenues around that when it comes to AI and that side of things with creativity.
So one more tool in the tool chest, but it's up to taste and creativity to rule the day.
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, it's information. That's what AI can provide to you. If you say, I wanted to make a blues song, it's going to do the most generic random or generic blues song that it can create, right? Based off the data sets that it's been trained off of. If you say, I want a blues song that is in this specific key, at this specific BPM, at this specific tempo, it will start to narrow things down. And it allows you to essentially identify those, or if you know what you're how to speak with it in that specific language, you will be able to be a bit more deterministic. But it's still probabilistic in the end, because it's still interpreting your language at that point. So I still think it's a really good form of exploring and trying to find ways for creativity, but I'm not sure it can be considered an instrument.
All right, we've got one question over there and maybe one more.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. I found it very, very interesting. I guess my next question is probably around patterns. So I'm a big fan of watching horror films, and so they come with trailers that are filmed with high-pitched sounds, typically string instruments that cue the audience that this is scary and there's tension building. So if I take that and then place that mechanism with the technology you're talking about, have you found that placing certain sounds in augmented or virtual space in front of the listener, behind the listener, left or right, are there patterns that musicians could take advantage of to generate a more emotional impact, AKA, I'm gonna place my guitar over here because I want melancholia to impact my audience more effectively? Or are we still so early in the adoption of this technology that those patterns are left to explore over the next decade or so? Again, thank you for your talk.
Thank you for the question. I don't necessarily know if it's been used in a creative way that you've been kind of describing it. I mean, there's been a lot of experiences in VR and AR where, you know, the sound designers create specific sounds in different locations in order to cue a specific type of spatial information out of that. When it comes to musically, the most that I've seen from this, from a creative point of view, is being able to make sure that you can hear the sounds clearly, intelligibly, and being able to switch between whichever sound you want to focus on. So sometimes a lot of people, when they listen to music, they focus on the vocals, right, and the speech there. But other times they may move to the harmony and the melody of the guitar or the piano, and whichever one is coming into focus. So I've seen where you do spatial mixes this way in order to create clarity around all the musical instruments so that you can hear everything more impactful, and you're not, the bass is not hiding behind the kick drum, for example, and things like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're at time. I know there are a couple other questions. Justin, will you stick around for a little bit afterwards? He'll stick around. Thank you so much, Justin. All right, now we're heading into a space that really interests me, which is history and storytelling. So our next speaker is Dr. Lou Brown. She is a sociocultural anthropologist and senior research scholar at Duke, where she works on projects that explores archives, activism, and the hidden stories behind cultural production, including the Rosetta Rights Archive. Welcome, Dr. Lou Brown.
Thank you. Whoa, sorry. 1977. Can we have the first slide, maybe? Yeah, thanks. 1977, a book about menopause. 1980, a live blues review at Avery Fisher Hall featuring mostly black women. 1980 to 1991, a record label releases 19 albums featuring the work of black women blues singers from the early 20th century. What do those things have in common? Rosetta Rights. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a project at Duke with Rosetta Rights papers. They're held at Duke in the Sally Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture. And she did all of those projects after the age of 50. She started those projects when she was in her 50s. And I'm going to start with the menopause project. She was doing all these things at once. So when she's out autographing books, the menopause book, you can see, you probably can't see this very well, but in tiny print on that third poster, it says, the next day after her menopause signing, you can see her give a talk on Mean Mothers, Independent Blues Women, okay? What do those things have in common, the blues and menopause? Okay, we think we know the answer to that. Hot flashes, you can't sleep, the sad songs just write themselves. But Rosetta had a different view of this, and she saw the connection as it's about women's voices. So her book about menopause centered women. What did women have to say about menopause? Surprisingly, no one had thought to ask them that before. And while she was writing that book, she was listening to these old 78s that she'd collected, these jazz and blues singers from the early 20th century, the 20s, the 30s. And these were women who were not scared to talk about how much fun sex was, or how bad it was sometimes, or, you know, this man is driving me crazy, I want another one, or, yes, also being sad. She wanted to tell the whole story about women's experience in menopause and in the blues. So she started writing a book about it, and then she realized, well, you know what, it was actually the music that got me excited about this, so people need to hear the music. So she decided she needed to create a live production. So she created a series of them. One of the most famous was at Avery Fisher Hall. Blues as a Woman. It's Coco Taylor, Willie Mae Thornton, Sippy Wallace were among the performers. So you see Sippy Wallace and Willie Mae Thornton were the elders in that in that group. At that time, Coco Taylor and Nell Carter were just young women, and so she had the spectrum there. But this still wasn't good enough for her. She's, okay, yes, we can hear these contemporary women, but what got me really excited were these women from the 20s, 30s, and 40s who nobody can hear anymore. Why can't they hear them? Why have their stories been left out? Why do we only hear women singing victims' blues? So she started a record label in her spare time. Rosetta Records was founded in 1979, 1980 by the work of her hands. She was involved in every part of it. Over the course of the next 12 years, she would put out 19 albums. Now, how do you go about preparing to do that kind of work, one might ask, when you're not a trained music historian? Rosetta trained herself in pretty much everything she did. She did a lot of research. In the archives at Duke, there are 10 boxes of books. If you go to the finding aid, you'll see in some of the books it says, or in some of the collection, it says notes and margins. Okay, this is our first clue that we're going to find the mark of Rosetta's hand in those books. We're going to see her research process. So here's an example, Blues Who's Who by Sheldon Harris. To his credit, Sheldon Harris did name the women. There are 102 women in that book. There are also a lot more men in that book, but there are 102 women. Rosetta counted them all. You can see it right there. And she listed their names. So she's finding them, she's writing their names down. That's where you have to start. If you don't know their names, you can't find out about them. But she also had to deal with some men who weren't quite as enlightened as Sheldon Harris. So Jorgen Jepsen, in his multi-volume jazz discography, he included Ella Johnson, for example. But in Ella Johnson's entry, there are 2 songs and then a note. You might find some other things by this artist under the name Buddy Johnson. Well, Buddy Johnson was her brother. So you go here, and yes, there are a number of things with Ella Johnson's name on them. She was the vocalist for Buddy Johnson's orchestra. So Rosetta marked all of that. She also notes which records she has in her collection, so she's starting to prepare for her own label, and she's also making some assessment of the music. Very slow, worn out, that one's probably not gonna make it onto the label. But she's not just counting the women, she's also putting her own thoughts into it elsewhere. She's engaged in dialogue with these mostly male historians and critics. Here with Samuel Charters, she takes him on for accepting Webster's dictionary definition of the blues as songs with melancholy words. And she's like, what? You know, come on, you've even got the conspiracy theory going over there at Webster's. And then she takes him to task personally for his own writing. He thinks all blues are sad, no joy. So she's putting herself, she's literally writing herself into the story as she's doing her research, leaving traces of her own process. And her hands are involved in every part of Rosetta Records. When Mean Mothers was the first album on the label, she wrote to get the cover photo of Madam C.J. Walker, even though Madam C.J. Walker was not a musician. She was a strong woman, and she said, she's a great representative for this label. She wrote all the liner notes, and she sourced all the photos. Every album was a gatefold album. So, how many of you knew about Rosetta Rights before tonight? That's why we're doing this work. She was making sure people didn't get erased. We're making sure Rosetta doesn't get erased. She saw these women as creating a space for other women, and all of us, not just women, to envision a different world. Something's possible other than what we've been told. And as long as we keep their stories in our repertoire, if we keep telling these stories to each other, then we can keep that utopian vision, those utopian possibilities available to us all. And in the interest of not erasing people, these are all the team members who've worked on the project so far for the past 3 years. And thank you to everybody who's made the project possible.
Thank you. That was really interesting. So, get your questions ready. I think we may have a few. I have a question. Is there anyone today doing work similar?
So I don't know so much about record labels, but I'll talk about a couple of musicians who are doing the work, musical artists. I mean, everybody around here, if you don't know Reese Palmer, go find out who Reese Palmer is. She's doing the work. Her Color Me Country Radio is about reclaiming Black women and Black people and people, non-binary people in country music, and she's just doing amazing work. So I think Reese is the historian to everybody should be looking to in the music world right now. I also think Shirlette Ammons she did her Gladys Bentley project a few years ago, and that was a different take on a different kind of version of resurfacing someone's work. She didn't re-sing Gladys Bentley's songs because there actually were not that many recorded. We don't have that much of Gladys Bentley to listen to. But she channeled the way Gladys Bentley makes her feel. And then Julia Keefe's Indigenous Big Band. Julia Keefe is a Native American jazz conductor and singer, and she's done a project on Mildred Bailey, who is a famous Native American jazz singer. So those are three that if you don't know who they are, go look them up, because they're all really special.
And shameless plug, PBS North Carolina has a fairly new series called Shaped by Sound, which I think Reese Palmer and the second one that you mentioned, Shirlette, was on there as well. I know, I got you. So go watch that great series. Any questions in the audience? Yes, coming to you.
Thank you for your presentation, and obviously she was a very amazing woman. What do you think were the attributes that made her so successful?
What were the attributes that made Rosetta successful? She did not think there wasn't anything. She thought there was nothing she could not do. She trained to be a stockbroker. She wrote books. She raised 3 daughters as a divorced woman in the 50s and 60s. Yes, a lot of it was just individual chutzpah, I guess, it was just that. She also, to be fair, it is an interesting thing, and I'm glad you asked this because it does give me a chance to point out one thing. We always talk about it as a one-person label, and working with students, sometimes we really have to walk that back and be like, well, it's not literally one person doing every single thing. It's that she's in charge. She does have her hands involved in everything, but she had smart people around her. She proved herself. She collected those 78s. She joined the record research community and became part of that, even though it was mostly men, and she wasn't taken seriously for a long time. And a lot of those men never took her seriously. You find her name pop up on some chat rooms even today, and some pretty bad things. Well, she was pretty good except for all that feminist stuff that she was doing, So I think she knew she drew people to her because she did the work. And so people were then willing to help her out. She had excellent people doing the sound, cleaning up the records, doing the manufacturing process for her to clean up those 78s. So that's, yeah.
Another plug while we get to our next question. Reese Palmer is performing at RTP Hub on September 12th. So put that on your calendar if you would like to see her. We got a question back there? Awesome.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for your talk. Can you tell us more about the role of the music itself in your research project, both listening to the 78 collection that she had and the music that she recorded through her label, and how that is shaping your interpretation of the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we don't have the 78s. We have the albums. We don't have the original recordings or the masters for those. Those are not held by Duke. Our team we started actually thinking that the music itself was going to be a lot of the focus, and it's, there are 96, well, actually it turns out 95 women, and then O'Neill Spencer, who are on the albums. We just need to, start Rosetta's work again and start researching those people. And we pretty quickly discovered, when we're starting from the archive, we have her materials to work from, and so, there's a limit there, and that it became more interesting to us in many ways to think about this bigger ecosystem that she was in of jazz and blues historians and writers, and how somebody, as a DIY feminist entrepreneur, entered that world and made all these things happen. We're still trying to figure some of that out, but this kind of analog process, for our students and for some of us, even the mail, you know, I mean, sometimes I'll look at someone who's like, how in the world did they send these letters back and forth so fast, you know? And so just like that kind of thing, just putting yourself in that time period and remembering that it's possible to do a lot more than we think we can do. So I mean, the music, yes, the music is extremely important. And our process, we listen to it a lot. We don't do a lot of analyzing. This coming year, we're gonna do some more listening sessions with it to do exactly that kind of work of what was exciting Rosetta. How did she put this together?
All right. One more question? Yeah. Wow, fast question. I think I saw a hand go up really fast.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I would just be curious how you would envision increasing visibility of this story beyond an academic audience and even beyond talks like this, especially towards maybe women artists or women artists of color.
Yeah, that's something we're thinking about a lot. And I will also say there are some other projects. We are not the only people who have kind of rediscovered Rosetta Records and Rosetta Rights lately. So there may be some other projects in the works that are focusing on the music. But locally, I mean, okay, so I do think that we are kind of adopting some of that 1980s approach of things trying to be as much in person as possible because it's meaningful. We're trying to build community. So that's more, we're going to be doing more of that this coming year with the public library and at Duke, using Duke Radio also to play some of the albums and have some interviews. And the liner notes themselves, I mean, they're tiny print and a lot of words, you know, so there's a lot of stuff there for people to learn about. So, I mean, we're going to be doing more of that now that we understand better what's possible.
Great,
Thank you, Dr. Lou Brown. All right. Our final speaker is Greg Bell. He is a longtime performer and event producer who has helped shape the region's live music scene for decades, from festivals to small venues, and now he works with the Orange County Arts Commission. Please welcome Greg Bell.
Thank you all very much. It's very nice to be here. It's interesting scheduling tonight. We started off in the cloud, and now we're ending up in the cave. By the cave, I'm not speaking about geologic term. I mean a very small 58-person venue underground in Chapel Hill Carver area. Thank you. Shout out for the cave. And so I'm here to talk about the independent music venue. Not a small capacity. I'm not talking about academic or institutional venues, which are wonderful and have their place. I'm not talking about Cocoa Booth. I'm not talking about Durham Performing Arts Center, which are also wonderful facilities. I'm talking about Cat's Cradle, King's, Neptune's, all the places that are scraping to get by. I'll just cut to the chase. We're blessed in this area to have so many wonderful, wonderful places to see music and create new musics and performing arts. Specifically, I want to talk about the economic impact. These venues, unlike some of the larger institutional facilities I was speaking of earlier, these present music night after night, month after month, year after year. They don't have a season. They don't go dark on Mondays. The Cave, for example, is 364 nights of music a year, and they've done that forever. What happens when you go out any given weekend night in the Triangle? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people out at these venues. They're purchasing tickets. They're purchasing dinner before the shows. They're getting drinks after the show. They're hopefully buying merch from the drinks. They're buying ride share. If they're coming from out of town, they're consuming room nights in our lodging establishments. They have a very discernible economic impact locally. Additionally, they're creating jobs within the club ecosystem itself. And I prefer the term ecosystem to scene because it really is almost a closed loop sometimes. The musicians who are working in this environment, it's often difficult for them to have full-time regular jobs with benefits and things like that, and they rely on the community to find them the gig work and the side hustles and the things in allied arts to continue to do the work that they love and that they do as a profession, but they do it often as a passion project. They're not stuck there, they're making a choice. And in order to be able to afford to perform at King's, they are working the door at Neptune's, or they're doing posters for the Cat's Cradle, or they're doing guitar repair, or they're doing sound setup, or they're picking up all of the different skills within the ecosystem that are needed. And furthermore, they're training themselves and others to go on to bigger and larger venues and continue this same work of presenting in-person music to live people in a live room. Not even touching on the defining regional identity, creating expensive space, and all the other side benefits they have. Obviously, we've got a wealth of history here, going from Hollow Rock String Band, Elizabeth Cotton back in the 30s, Ninth Wonder, all the way up to Wednesday. Bands just continue to come out of, well, Elizabeth Cotton wasn't out of the scene, I should correct myself, but most of the bands that you can think of that came out of this area, Ben Folds 5, have emerged out of these local micro ecosystems of community. There was obviously an economic impact. On a national level, we're talking about $153 billion. The merch economy is very, very relevant to keeping these people in business. That's due to changes in the markets and in the business. That's where most of the performers' income is coming from now. So when you go to a show, and I hope you all do go to shows, I hope you'll stop by the merch table, buy T-shirts, buy stickers, buy hats, buy the music if you like it. I've got that down lower on the list because the margin on music is much smaller for most musicians than is the margin on soft goods. If you're buying a T-shirt, they're taking most of that money home. If you're buying a record, depending on their relationship with their label, they may or may not make money off of that. They may be paying off debt, or they may make some money, but the production cost for hard recorded media is very high compared to these other things. And then, of course, there's the trickle-down effect. When you're buying this shirt, you're supporting the person who probably hand-pulled it in the garage when they weren't on the road playing bass with their other band. There are a lot of challenges facing the local music scene right now. Coming out of COVID has been very difficult. COVID itself was, of course, very difficult, but people's consumer patterns have changed. Shows are starting earlier, ending earlier. That gets rid of, if any of you have ever worked in the food business, it's a table change. They're losing several hours worth of potential beer sales. The profit margins that were already thin are getting smaller. The rent for creative spaces, both for presenting venues and also for living as a bass player in a punk band, are getting harder and harder to find. And then I really need to talk about the third-party ticketing fees for a moment. There's a bill in the North Carolina Senate right now that is hoping to rein in some of the predatory practices that some of y'all may have accounted if you've tried to buy any tickets online to shows, whereby you're paying incredibly inflated prices, or you're having to go through a scalper paying those, or worse yet, you get ripped off completely and buy from a site that's spoofing the Cat's Cradle or Haw River Ballroom. And this is a bipartisan bill. It's in the General Assembly this session. It's got a good chance of passing, and if you've got any inclination to do something, any one thing tonight, get in touch with your representatives and tell them you strongly support the passing of the Fair Ticket Bill. So that's one thing you can do. Other things you can do, go to shows regularly, buy advance tickets. The reason you want to buy advance tickets is clubs are making decisions about how much beer to chill, how much staff to bring in, how much money to pay the local artists, how much money to spend on hospitality backstage. A lot of economic decisions are being driven by ticket sales the day of, the day before, things like that. So if you know you're going to a show, go ahead and commit. And if something comes up, think of it as a contribution. You make contributions to nonprofit organizations all the time, and you probably don't get the tax benefit anymore. It shouldn't be any different if you're supporting a local band or a local venue. Buy merchandise. Support weeknight shows. Cat's Cradle, typically, they're very professional. They can bring in acts on Saturday nights that are going to sell tickets. What about Tuesday nights? Those are the nights that local acts are getting their start, that are getting the exposure on the big stage, and that are frankly, money losers most of the time for these venues. And then as a community, we can support venues by supporting zoning that will allow the noise or the loading in on Martin Street to get up the stairs at King's. That you can support things like the sip and stroll districts and things like that that more encourage people to get into the nightclub districts. And certainly do what you can to promote arts and cultural funding. That comes into these ecosystems as well. It doesn't just all go to nonprofit arts organizations, which are also wonderful, for whom I work. Just in closing, when a venue closes, like the Flatiron in Greensboro is threatening to do right now, the city loses a lot more than just a venue. It loses that economic vitality, but more than that, it loses the culture of vitality and the cultural resonance. It loses a meeting space for people to come together in person and discuss ideas, be it musically or through dance or just through drinking and cursing the world as we know it, but finding those common connections. I think those things are still really important, and those are some of the things that happen best in these small venues, in music festivals, in community gatherings that are happening sort of outside of the various controlling authorities. And I thank you for your time. If you want more information, National Independent Venue Association has tons of economic impact data up on it. There's a great economic impact study for the Dreamville Festival in Raleigh that's got tons of data, and you can see more up here on the screen. Thank you.
Greg. Thank you. Stay right there. So let's get our questions queued up. Raise your hand if you have a question. I've got a question. Since COVID, would it be your opinion that the music scene has kind of gone back to the way it was before COVID, or are we still struggling in that space?
It's changed a lot in ways that are unusual, perhaps. I think people are making much more last-minute ticketing decisions. They're not planning nearly as far ahead, and that's why buying those advance tickets helps a whole lot. Whereas we used to see at a festival I'm affiliated with, we used to see X amount of sales. We now see 30% of that X until a day before. People wait to see the weather. They wait to see if they're in town. They just wait to see if they're in the mood. And then slow times have changed, and which I like. I like getting home after a show at 11 o'clock, but it means that the venue's got a lot less time to sell beer, and that's where their money comes from. Venue is not making money off the ticket sales.
Hi, first off, thank you very much for your talk. Wanted to ask, with all the great local independent venues that we have in this area, what are the best ways for people to keep up with what is going on at these venues and to try to keep up with all the bands and everything that's coming into town?
That is such a good and difficult question. With the shrinkage of local print media, such as The Independent, or if you've been around long enough, The Spectator, they no longer have the capacity to publish updated calendars online. And a lot of people are trying to do those things, and it's a very difficult task. It requires curation because what we're talking about here is not every cover band playing at an oyster bar somewhere in Holly Springs. We're talking about original music, and so it's a curated list. The best way is through word of mouth, through the online platforms, which I know we're supposed to maybe be boycotting Spotify, but their algorithm is strong, and if you like Wednesday, then you might like MJ Linderman, and look, there's a really easy ticketing link. Look at the club calendars. See who's appearing with whom. It's really old school, and I wish somebody would figure out a way to automate the process of having a good local playlist.
Another question over here.
Hello, thank you for giving this talk. I was wondering what advice you would give to young musicians who wish to participate in their local music scene and start gigging but don't know where to start.
That's a hard one. Just do it. Take advantage of whatever resources you've got to get a demo tape together. It's okay if it's rough, but it needs to demonstrate what you do. Find friends that are in bands that maybe will let you open for them if they've got existing gigs. Start hanging out in local clubs. Really just beat the street and take, and I say demo tape, but I still think showing up with physical media of some sort. You need to learn how to do an EPK, which is an electronic press kit. Clippings, schedules, but if you don't have any clippings or schedules, where to start? Well, you make up stuff about yourself and you find somebody to print it. And then you cut that out and then you put it in your scrapbook and then you take that to somebody. Before you be willing to play crappy gigs and learn to do your own sound and basically all of your own thing, because their first gigs you may be doing it yourself.
May have time for one last quick question. This side's got a lot of questions.
Thank you. What are these venues doing to try to cut out a bunch of the friction points that people have to going to these shows, such as the ticketing fees, such as the parking that might cost as much as the ticket itself, that sort of thing? What are they doing to try to make it easier to convert people that haven't necessarily explored the independent scene as much into going into those shows?
I'm sorry, after ticketing fees, what was the second issue?
Parking.
Oh, parking. Well, those, if you're trying to go to some of the shows downtown Raleigh, those are definitely municipal issues to address. The parking can't be solved at a club level. They can give as much info on the website as they can, but ultimately, we're very car dependent and there's not enough mass transportation, and there you go. As far as the ticketing fees, I think the venues are very aware of it. They're strongly behind this anti-resale regulation, which drives up the prices for everybody, and it doesn't pass through to the artist. When you pay $500 for a Solange ticket that actually you can buy for $38.75 online still, the only person that's benefiting is the person that set up the spoof website. I'm thinking through the list of clubs here. Most of them have very low fees. And the Cat's Cradle runs an in-person box office on show days. You can show up any day they've got a show and buy a ticket to any show that's on sale. And I believe you skip all of the fees if you buy directly from them.
All right, we are at time. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, let's give all of our speakers a round of applause. They did a wonderful job tonight. I want to thank everybody for being here, for being part of this conversation, for asking your thoughtful questions. If you are new to Frontier RTP, this program is just one of many that this community offers. It's everything from co-working to community events. Then we also have Boxyard, not too far, right across the street over here with food, music. Great place to keep the conversation going. There's also a dog park over there too. Together with Frontier Boxyard, we're part of Hub RTP, which I'm sure you've seen has expanded since COVID, really. It's a space for connecting, for living, for working. Again, I want to give a thank you to our presenting sponsor, RTI International, as well as PBS North Carolina, for live streaming tonight's event. Make sure that you check out this recording as well as past RTP 180 talks online. Our next RTP 180 is all about energy, and that is on August 20th. Registration will open on July 20th, so make sure you mark your calendars and set your reminders. Thank you again. Hope you all have a great night. Stay cool, and we will see you next time.